You know, here on Truth Be Told, there's nothing like a true crime story. And today, we have just that. We have a true story of murder, blackmail, and greed. Award winning author and journalist Chip Jacobs joins us to discuss his true crime novel, The Darkest Glare, which takes place in one of the deadliest eras in American history. So grab your popcorn as we dive into The Darkest Glare. I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios award-winning author and journalist Chip Jacob. Chip, my friend.
Thank you, Tony. That was about the best applause I've ever received.
What applause? Well, I'm excited to have you here because, true crime is one of those subjects. You start watching a television show and you just can't stop watching it because it's so intriguing, and the mysteries and the deceit and greed and everything else that keeps you just staring at the television for hours and hours and hours. And then, of course, you wrote this book, The Darkest Glare. And so that's exactly why you're here, to talk about maybe a story we don't really know about or have heard about before. But I guess in the 1970s, there was a lot of corruption, a lot of people that really took advantage of other people, and they would go at all odds to get what they wanted. So first of all, you're an award-winning author and a journalist, and you've been doing this for quite a while. And I'm kind of curious on how you chose this story.
Well, it's great to be here. I feel like the story sort of chose me, like everything I do, in terms of a book. And it really started one day on, like everything in California, on Hollywood Boulevard.
Right.
It's right about the time of the Clinton Monica Lewinsky scandal, which is now being televised in a drama on TV.
Right.
Crime story. I'd recommend it. When I was just leaving daily journalism, and a source who had provided one front page expose after another for me stopped me kind of cold on the sidewalk. And as I've told people, Hollywood Boulevard back then was reminiscent of a Star Wars bar scene. It just got a colorful set of people and probably a few aliens walking down there. And this source of mine, who's named Jerry Snyderman, says, "Did I ever tell you I had a double murderer chasing me, that I had a partner killed?"
Oh my God.
That's not, idle banter.
Right.
And I kind of said, "What? You're just BSing me." Later, I thought, that he's just trying to impress me and show me he's cooler than his sort of nerdy personality. And lo and behold, I got interested in it. We had a little game where I would go to the County Hall of Records, pull up stuff, and find out not only was what he told me true, it was far more diabolical and absurd than he even understood. It was kind of like someone in a violent situation understanding it through a keyhole in a door. And it was much wider and bigger and stranger. And over the years, I just collected information, networked, met more people, and grew obsessed. And I just had to know the full story of what happened. And, you led off talking about true crime, and it's riveting, and people want to pull up a chair. But, there's something I don't fashion myself as a true crime writer. I don't know how people do that for a living, full-time, book after book. Right. Because, you are going around interviewing people and then writing about the worst moment of their life, a day that they live with every hour, and or an incident they live with every day. And, one was good enough for me, but, there's a very interior family drama that you get with some true crime stories. And that's what I got here, as well as a very much like a Greek tragedy, where you have the core of the book is about three men that should have set the LA real estate world on fire, Instead, they turned on each other, and we don't know who's going to be the last man standing. You know, you said nobody's really heard about the story, and it's true. Part of the reason it's not true is 1979 was a record year for murders in Los Angeles. The LAPD had 250,000 emergency calls. This is before 911.
250,000.
They had a quarter that they couldn't answer. There were more serial killers here than you could almost enumerate, including the Hillside Strangler, the Freeway Killer, the dating game killer, the Skid Row guy. This was the area when we really were seeing kind of resurgent and broiling populism after the peace and love counterculture. It was becoming a very me cutthroat time. I mean, people were in fights in gas stations after the oil embargo.
Right, I remember
We
that.
were hanging state leaders in effigy. People were getting alarm systems. The idea of white flight was a real thing where people were leaving, quote, the inner city to go to gated communities or put in slapdash alarm systems. It was a very angry, violent time. I was a high school kid during most of it, you know, blissfully driving around God knows what. You know, there was a lot of competition for the front page in terms of gruesome, terrible events. Shortly before this happened, there was a story that I actually added as a bonus one in my book about the lawyer that took on a former alcohol drug rehab turned alternative society. It was called Synanon. And this cult decided to pay back this crusading attorney by planting a 5-foot rattlesnake in his mailbox.
Oh my God.
And I mean, it became a giant worldwide incident, you know, talked about on Saturday Night Live, Walter Cronkite, but it does epitomize this kind of vengeful spirit in the air. So that's why you didn't see the story in the front page. And in fact, the LA Times didn't write anything about it. It appeared even deep inside the old Daily News under a story about Red Fox, the comedian, a story about his assault case on somebody. So it was terribly anonymous, except to those involved. And to them, it was a horror show. So my story really is about a space planning or interior architecture firm started by this nerdy, brilliant, generally introverted guy named Jerry Steinerman, who'd come from a very strange background, became the youngest man at his own firm, and worried nobody older would buy his space plans and other ideas because he looked like he was 14 years old. So he hired a man about 10 years older who was handsome, kind of looked like James Brolin, Josh's dad. Could sell, you know, ice to the Eskimos, and was bipolar and had a very erratic personality that he could cover up with his beautiful talk and look and flash.
Right.
Originally, they were supposed to just sell space plans, which is when you have a big office building and it needs to be redone, they design the interior, you know, using light, hallways, offices, you know, industrial psychology. I mean, you know, you can build a building once, but you can redesign a floor endlessly. But his Jerry's partner, a guy named Richard, got ambitious and had an appetite for get rich quick. So he said, I want to go into constructing the offices, not just designing them, and also move into luxury home remodels. This was the era when Proposition 13 had just passed, and that cut people's property taxes throughout California by a pretty good amount. So they had more disposable income. Right. Richard was trying to jump on that opportunity. Unfortunately, the guy they hired was older than both of them, and he looked like a very Joe Sixpack, blue collar guy, had a lot of experience, and unbeknownst to them, he was a murderer, very, very good at hiding behind this veneer of legitimacy and getting off from juries. And, you know, it was a question about being careful what you want and what you wish for. Right. Because the person that you think seems the answer to your problems will become a problem where you don't have an answer. So that's really the story. Their office was in an old converted mansion
Oh,
on the
really?
edge of Miracle Mile, which is not far behind that shot you have there. And they had everything going for them, except knowledge about each other's pasts. Jerry largely accepted. And there started to become plots to financially defraud one another. And
I was going to say, how did that all get started?
so there's three guys. You
Right.
know, one has brains, one has flash, one has brawn and experience. Unfortunately, Richard can't control his impulse to cheat, even though I do think he was a good person. He was bipolar. He was insecure that he had not achieved enough. And Richard had come from the Beverly Hills, Bel Air area. A lot of
Ah,
high expectations on him. Jerry came from kind of throwaway North Hollywood, and Howard was originally from the Midwest, but his soul and his friends were out in Ontario, out past the county line, and in sort of wasteland in terms of opportunity. And Richard thought he could get away with cheating Jerry, and he thought later he could get away with cheating Richard, and that turned out to be a deadly mistake. Without giving away too much, the center of the book is a rainy night execution style murder of one of those two younger partners and the madcap terror that goes on for months that follows. One of the issues, or not issues, but one of the interesting asides about the story is it's so Coen Brothers. It feels so little like a reality that we inhabit. People didn't believe it was true. But I have the records thanks to a lot of time in the county courthouse,
right.
interviewing folks, networking, moving around, collecting piece by piece to show it is true. And in fact, I probably underreported some of the more terrifying elements. But it does make you wonder about who you invite into your house.
Right.
How well do you know this person? Now, this is 1979. There was no Facebook. There was no Twitter. There was no, Google.
Right.
You basically could hire a private detective or trail the person yourself. So, it was such a compelling drama. And I think one of the main takeaways that I got from it is just as evil has a real ability to hide out in the open, unexpected valor can reside in the most ordinary people. And after this murder happens, the surviving partner does things he never expected. He has to wear a bulletproof vest. He has to wear a disguise. He has to worry about his family, including a pregnant wife and toddler, getting murdered or kidnapped to hold him up for ransom money. There's sometimes human monsters have sort of an uncanny ability to know what you don't want them to know. That's what the surviving member faced, and it seems almost satanic at times.
Right. Well, I was going to ask.
Meanwhile, the LA, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to ask
Yeah.
Was it Richard that was the one you said was from Beverly Hills?
Yeah. Yep.
Was he the one that did you ever like research the families of each of these people,
Definitely.
Richard and
Yeah.
Jerry?
I did.
How
Yeah,
was Richard's family?
Richard's family was not too pleased with me asking questions.
Oh, really? They didn't want to bring up the past, huh?
Jerry's family overall was great. They opened up. It was painful. Richard's ex-wives talked to me. They were wonderful people, damaged by this.
Right.
But yeah, I did to some degree. And Richard's very interesting. He's probably the most interesting because he was not only handsome, but he was very talented as a draftsman and space planner himself. I mean, women almost swooned for him without him trying.
Oh, really?
He could craft handsome furniture. His father was a tough guy who died at an early age. I was disappointed Richard was a more athletic and a he-man. Richard's widow told me his idea of exercise was a long day shopping in Neiman Marcus.
So a different class, a different class.
A different guy, but you know, that's the thing about folks that can't tell the truth. It's almost like the movie No Country for Old Men. You know, eventually you are going to tell a lie to somebody who doesn't forget, and that's what happened here. You know, you can only get away with it so long. You know, some people will sue you if you defraud them or do them wrong.
Right, right.
They'll divorce you. They'll talk crap behind your back, but you'll reach that one individual that'll go, no, I want this person to get a more gothic piece of retribution. And it was sad. You know, today Richard probably would have been treated for his bipolar. Okay. He would have been called out. He wouldn't have gotten as far. And you know, but that wasn't the case in 1979. He'd been able to get by and dazzle people so much with his appearance and sales presentations. Nobody cared about his past.
Well, let's talk about the real estate part of it. You said that they creating this business should have been a huge business for them all. And where did that go wrong? Because was it just greed itself that consumed them? Because if at that time, I'm sure Los Angeles was, growing rapidly and office space was needed and the money was hopefully was there. I don't know. I was only like 9 years old, so I wouldn't have known. But so where did it go wrong?
Well, it was the realist. You know, back in the late 70s, the U.S. economy was stagnating. There's something called stagflation,
right?
Which is a terrible concoction of just stagnant job growth, manufacturing expansion, and inflation. But in 1980, there was already going to be a redevelopment in downtown LA, which would have opened up lots of opportunities. And Proposition 13 put money in homeowners' pockets as well as corporations. And instead of building new office towers, landlords and tenants were just redesigning their own suites.
Got it.
So, somebody who's smart and savvy can really maximize those opportunities, and they weren't doing that. Jerry, even young as he was, he was working in the Century Plaza Towers in Century City with a guy named Paul Fegan, who was this legendary leasing tycoon and major grandstanding kind of party thrower, scenester. Paul Fegan used to have these real estate related parties where people were told to dress in a certain color and watch famous hairstylists cut his bizarre hair. And he claims he was the inspiration for a pretty well-known Peter Sellers movie.
Oh yeah, which one?
I think it's something Alice B. Toklas. But he knew famous people. Paul did, and he had David Bowie and Devo perform at his parties. So Paul Fegan though saw in Jerry a genius who could help him space plan at his properties throughout the United States. But Jerry was working with, alternative psychology therapy places that needed space work,
right? Including
Synanon, ironically, and Primal Scream therapy places. He dealt with crusty kind of Jewish landlords that try to intimidate him and browbeat him into a cheaper price. He worked with stiff, kind of soulless insurance company folks that, wanted, a cookie cutter plan. Jerry had a lot of more creative ideas. Richard was a salesman. And where it went wrong was when they brought Howard in. And when Howard was first interviewed, he said, I'll be your foreman. You can use my contractor's license, which you need to do construction, obviously. But I'll need a couple weeks away eventually to testify in a trial in San Bernardino. He said, I was a witness to a guy who stole some construction tools. This was a massive lie. And they didn't realize Jerry and Richard, who Howard Garrett was. And it sure would blow up in their face. Where it went wrong was, I mean, just the idea that two guys that were expert at space planning and very good at it, and kind of young Turks taking on the establishment, that they could go into construction. And in fact, Richard had been warned against doing it. One colleague said, beware, man, some of these people in construction, you're going to have to deal with animals. It's like animal training. You don't know their backgrounds.
Right.
Really?
Right.
But Richard saw quick money, big money. You know, they could be a one-stop shop. Come to us. They would tell a client, well, we'll design your space. We'll make it different. And we'll bring our own crew in to do the work. You don't have to get bids. You know, it's convenient. We'll cut you a discount. It sounded good. But, you know, they didn't effectively know what they're doing. And then Richard thought he could embezzle money from Jerry without Jerry knowing, and that he could manipulate and drain Howard's credit lines. Jerry reacted by, one of my favorite parts of the book, Jerry lures Richard to one of his stomping grounds, the Polo Lounge in Beverly Hills, bringing with him a man that he tells Richard is a prospective client, but actually it's Jerry's lawyer, saying, you've been busted. Either you give up your share of the company or we're going to the DA today. And, you know, he gets over on Richard. For once, the nerd beats the flashy, cool guy.
Right.
You know, that was very popular in high school. And then Jerry sort of thinks he survived his gauntlet. He'll use lawyers and, you know, go on to Jerry 2.0, and he's learned a valuable lesson about trusting your partners and knowing them. And boy, was he wrong. It was nowhere over. In fact, it was just getting started. And soon he was living this surreal life where, you know, there was every window he passed held the possibility of a bullet whistling through it. And he became part of a group of probably 20 or 30, maybe even more people in Los Angeles, feeling terrorized by Howard and a gang of criminals and assassins that can't shoot straight. And these people that Howard decided when he left the company, it was called Space Matters, he was going to finally no longer be manipulated and marginalized by white collar real estate executives. It's very much a blue collar versus white collar dynamic. And it takes them almost 10 tries to bump off their first victim here. And other people that he set his gang against came inches from being slaughtered. One family in Monrovia, in fact, is saved a execution style takeover house killing because one of the people in the house had been in the back watching Laverne and Shirley. Bad guys broke in and he jumped out the window and called police. It was like fate interceding sometimes to spare the innocent. And I like that part of it. There very easily could have been 20 people dead if a few things had broken the other way.
At that time, you know, from the 1970s and back, they had unions and the mob and all these hitmen. Were they part of any organization, or no? They were just locals.
No. Howard decided. He felt he was always being overlooked and ripped off by his white collar bosses that didn't pay him enough, or
he just had enough,
denied him other jobs. And so he used his brief time at Space Matters and feeling that he had been, fleeced, to say, I'm going to start a boutique murder for hire company.
Oh my God.
That goes after wealthy real estate executives that hold a lot of cash at home. And his two ex-bosses at Space Matters, Jerry and Richard, were going to be his two, beta tests, his two guinea pigs. And Howard was very smart, would have been a good chess player because he could think of steps ahead. So he recruited kind of low lives with drug problems and long rap sheets to do his dirty work. And he would train them and he would groom them and he'd position them And when took time, when it came time for the killings, he'd split town, have an alibi, right? And if the police came, he could say, "I don't know anything about these guys. I was just hanging out, maybe just uh, spouting off big talk. They're the ones that did it. Look at their records.
Right.
Howard did have,
I was going to say, how was
a
his record?
himself, but it wasn't like these other people. And so he was going to use them as fall guys, right? And and Howard also did something else interesting. He got people in his debt. He did favors for them. He gave them some money. He got it so that he in effect owned them, and he could pressure them to do hideous things that they may not want of. And the first hitman that he recruited to do his dirty work against Space Matters actually developed a conscience. And this was not
really
exactly a Boy Scout, and he fled. And he has a very important part in this book, not just because of his life and his bad decisions, but in the end, there was a little bit of a hero in him as well. He knew he was a loser. He just didn't want to come off killing more people than the Manson family. And that's what Howard really wanted him to do.
So, I mean, that we keep forgetting, from 2021 to 1990 or 1979, because like you said, we have every angle to find out who people are.
Yep.
I can go to your Instagram, Facebook,
Yep.
Instantly check your records. Back then, you didn't have that. It was kind of like, well, you give me a resume, I have to pretty much believe what you write down, and also people off the street, you just didn't know. So I was gonna
back then, letters of recommendation were even more important, or a phone call.
Right.
Richard did talk to Howard's old boss.
Oh, really?
And the man lied.
Oh, the guy.
I saved for the end of the book why he lied.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But Howard had threatened him, and
saying if you say anything.
When Richard calls, "Hey, is this a good guy? Is he dependable and solid and trustworthy?" That old boss did not tell the truth. And it's very much in concert with the idea of good people doing nothing in the face of evil is almost as bad a sin as the evil itself. And that's really what happened here. I don't think I would have been attracted to the story unless it had those bigger themes.
Right. I just think it's funny that people can talk other people into doing crimes, especially murder.
Yeah.
I can understand. It's like, okay, you get mad, you go and take a gun, and you kill somebody because it pissed you off.
Yeah.
Somebody, you took advantage of me. But to convince other men or women, but other men at that time, to go and murder another soul or another person, it just baffles me that he could convince him. Was he that manipulative? Not manipulative.
No, was he not manipulative?
Yeah.
But I mean, it's, there's a couple things here. Somebody with no opportunity and already is telling himself stories that I could have been something had it not been for a biased society,
right,
or people that don't like the way I talk.
Right.
They are more easily gullible. The lead assassin Howard had was this little guy with bushy hair, who kind of and big blocky glasses that looked very Charles Nelson Riley. And
oh my God,
it almost looks like he could have been an aerospace engineer. As a child, this man, his name is Johnny Williams, he had a giant IQ and a semi-photographic memory.
Oh, wow.
Something terrible happens to him as a child where he bangs his head. I'll let people read the book. And it kind of turned him from a child from a lower income family with, huge upside into a sociopath. He had killed many people, not many, I'll say 3 people from what I've learned, before he worked for Howard. And at the trial, the DA had never seen anybody like him, because he had absolutely no neurological centers of his brain that could feel contrition or regret or value human life. So somebody like that it's going to be, it's not going to be as hard an argument. And this little killer, he in another life he would have loved to have been in the army. He wanted to be a marksman. When he gets the rifle that he uses in this assassination at the heart of the book, he's proud and he practices and he wants to he wants to earn his stripes, So it wasn't as hard for Howard if he found the right personalities to convince them.
Do you think, because like you were saying, there is a lot of serial killers, and then it sounds like that frame of mind with a lot of these men, was it because of the Vietnam War? Or, I mean, what were people going through at that time to put them in a mindset where there wasn't a lot of regret? Because like Ted Bundy, he was very intelligent.
Yes, he was.
And a lawyer but no remorse, no.
I don't know the answer. I mean, a lot of people have asked that. What was it about California? Was it post Vietnam and post Watergate and feelings of hopelessness? If you watch the movies from 1979, they really do immediately reflect the zeitgeist.
Mm-hmm,
you had Deer Hunter, you had Taxi Driver, you had the China Syndrome,
mm-hmm.
You had a few years earlier Network and Howard aligned. And Network, there's this famous line is, "I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take it anymore."
Right.
But what was the it? And the it to me was a system of capitalism and upward mobility they were told as children that would be greater for them than their parents. And it proved not to be true. In terms of serial killers, I mean, when you look, some of these people, I don't know if they killed because they were just, unrepentant sadists,
right.
And they enjoyed it.
Right.
Some of them did. Others, others were into torture. You don't know whether it was, some of it was sexually driven.
Right.
Others was probably going back to their parents. I think the freeway killer had been a Vietnam vet, or the Hillside Strangler, one of the two. So they'd seen some pretty bad things, but people have wondered: was it in California's water? Was it the smog, which I know a lot about?
Right.
What was happening? I don't know. I mean, there were other serial killers around. Remember, Son of Sam. We had the guy. The Golden State Killer was getting active, but it seemed to be breeding it a lot more. And then, of course, sort of the end of this serial killer craze in Southern California was in the 80s when I was in college. The Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I think Howard actually took advantage of the fear in the air and the overwhelmed police department, and he thought, what? It's going to be easier for me to get away with this mayhem. Yeah. When he'd been a very careful person about his crime than before. And I think there's also sort of an effort, psychology, like, what? My life is hell. I never made anything of myself. All these other people seem to be doing better. Maybe they've cheated the system. So why shouldn't I go and use blood for money? And so he was, it was sort of interesting. Space Matters monetized construction. Howard said, I'm going to monetize destruction.
Wow, that's fascinating. This is the part where you stare at the television and really get into the mix of the story. So because Howard, like you said, with Richard and Jerry, it was Jerry you said that you spoke to about.
Jerry was a source of mine.
Yeah.
When I was an investigative reporter at the old LA Daily News, having a great time. He just called me out of the blue, started feeding me one story about subway construction problems, redevelopment agency graft, things of that nature. And, looking back, I do wonder if Jerry was grooming me, preparing to tell me this story, because he held a lot of guilt about survivor's complex. He later in his life said, I got to save people. And I think because he felt he couldn't save Richard from his own demons and couldn't save himself after this was over, Many people got therapy. Jerry refused. And I
Oh,
really
really?
do believe that haunted him into his grave.
Mm.
And, Jerry is one of these guys that should have been, the Elon Musk of space design. He had a mathematical spatial geometry prodigal capability about him. A lot of folks thought he should be working for NASA.
Oh,
Jerry.
wow.
People have told me Jerry was one of those guys that could look at a parking lot designed for only 100 cars and figure out how to pack 150 in. Just innate, And so, Jerry wanted me to tell this story. He didn't know the full extent of it. I mean, I told him things he never knew.
Oh, really?
But inside, he'd never gotten over it. And so later, Jerry was the most unusual and most entertaining activist in Los Angeles in the late 1990s. And I would realize after spending years researching this story, the reason he was doing it, why he was taking on powerful forces, big entities, even facing death threats. To them, they were bullies because he felt he'd been bullied himself. And someone stole his potential from him. And it was kind of projected rage. And I swear to you, nobody has ever seen somebody pull the stunts Jerry did in Los Angeles, in the late 90s, early 2000s, whether it was staging a hunger strike of a blind guy outside the mayor's office, using, I'm sorry to say, indigents to kill a really misguided plan for a homeless center, giving Scientologists and old women movie cameras to film a needle exchange directly across from a school, that type of thing. I mean, he was doing really daring, muckraking that would have gotten somebody hurt or sued. He didn't care, and there was a fearlessness about him.
Why didn't he care? Why do you think he didn't care? It was born
from the fearfulness about him from 1979. He never kind of leached 1979 out of his system.
I was going to say, why do you think that embedded in him and the fear just wasn't there anymore? Or was it always, was he always that way?
I just think I think he mutated.
Oh.
And, he'd seen the worst. He, after this incident occurred, it resulted in the breakup of his family, divorce, loneliness. He developed type 1 diabetes, just like Howard had. I think he felt cursed. And when I met him, he was basically living in one of his office buildings in Hollywood. Jerry wasn't just an activist. He was actually a pretty wealthy developer. He knew how to make money. It came so easy to him. Jerry used to say, money is, making money is a little bit like sex. It's more fun when you do it with somebody else.
Yeah. Wow. So in the end, because we have about 5 minutes left. In the end, because I don't want to give it away, we want people to go get the book. And by the way, everybody, this is Chip Jacobs, The Darkest Glare, and this is a true story about 1979. Kind of a throuple, a throuple of people that murder.
I like to say it's a murder triangle, and the triangle was like an obtuse triangle where the sharpest angle was pointed down at Jerry, the least likely one to make it out alive.
Right, and when you went, because you said you tried to speak with the family, why do you feel the family didn't want to talk about Jerry so much? Why, or that era?
Richard's family.
I'm sorry, Richard's family.
Yeah, it's okay. No, Richard's family, I think, were living in denial that Richard's own actions were mainly responsible for his demise.
Yeah.
There was pride. There was the idea of like, who's this dude with a notepad? Who do they think they are? And actually, when the first version of this book came out, one of his relatives kind of called to threaten me and say, I'm a lawyer, I'm going to sue you. And thank goodness I'm a old reporter at heart. And I got online and I went to the State Bar Association. And they go, no, you're not a lawyer. But I think it was just, in the end, it was picking a scab over a deep wound. Richard was a beautiful person, appearance-wise. Everybody liked him. He seemed like the winner, but inside of him was a terrible fatalism, Richard was. And I don't know what would have became of him. His own father died at a relatively young age, and I think Richard thought that same fate would occur to him. And it's what's super painful is that Richard had so much evidence. Folks were after him, and he didn't leave Dodge, and he had a kid, two kids, and that really that's what breaks my heart, But I think he fell into depression, drug use, mental illness, and fact is, there's this misconception that mentally ill people are responsible for a lot more death and murder than they receive. That's not true. They're more vulnerable to it, and maybe Howard played up on that. But yeah, Richard was supposed to be the successful prodigy that lived up to those expectations on the west side of LA, where there's a lot of expectation.
Oh, a lot. Yeah, for the people that have never been
there. They still hadn't come to grips with it.
Right. I mean, it definitely makes sense. And how long did this saga last? Because with Howard, I mean, again, don't want to give everything away, but how long did they, like you said, even Jerry said he lived in fear for a long time.
Yeah, that's part of the reason I did see a book in this is, most of the action takes place in about 5 or 6 months. And from the time of the time of Howard and Richard's, messing with each other, one defrauding the other plotting payback, to Howard's arrest was about 5 months. And Jerry had to spend a couple months on the run in a hotel room under police protection. And when the first attempt to try to bust Howard by recording incriminating words, there was a very high stakes, surreal showdown at the LA Tar Pits, and that does not go well for Jerry.
Oh, wow.
And because Howard had done so many other dark things, they wanted to create a multi-indictment case against him. That was going to be a winnable case in court. You have to prove reasonable. That was going to be blow past reasonable doubt. And Jerry was the casualty of this and had to wait in his hotel room and try to keep his business afloat and make sure killers didn't go find his family. And, that can mess with your head.
Oh, for sure.
But Jerry eventually does stand up to Howard by using his intelligence, where Howard intimidated people by glaring and glowering and plotting. And when Howard looked at you with deadly intent, you wished you were never alive.
Okay, the last question, because now, did you did talk to Howard's family?
No.
No.
No,
were you fearful to talk to Howard's family, or?
Yes, I was.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I was. Yes.
I would be too.
The hitman involved in this died in prison after being denied parole because he was still very much a threat to society. I wavered with a letter to asking to interview him, and then I heard he died, and I ripped up that letter. I had put it in my mailbox, taken it out. I was scared, but I also wanted to know the truth. Mm-hmm. So there was plenty of other material. I didn't have to dip into that criminal world. Right. And really, I have the assistant DEA who prosecuted Howard to giving me details that let me into this world. And you would not have wanted to be part of this gang. It was like a viper's pit.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
But it's still, I still go back to Richard and Jerry when they started out together without Howard. And it was two strange bedfellows, trying to pursue the American dream. And there was something beautiful about these two men trying to lift each other up. And I wish they would have continued that.
Yeah.
Instead of getting starry-eyed, especially Richard, with dollar signs there. And it's never worth it. When you take a shortcut to be successful, eventually you're going to be looking at a cliff.
Yeah. No, I listen, I've been in business several times with people, and it does. I've learned it's best to go on your own if you can.
Yes.
Because, somebody always wants to take the high road, and some always seems to take the low road, and greed and jealousy and all that stuff sets in. So, but
Jerry used to say, Jerry at first, after this is over, carried a gun in his briefcase.
Oh my gosh.
wouldn't trust anybody. And even at the end of his life, which I feel is premature, he would never let a contractor come over to his house. And he wouldn't even deal with, he would let somebody else in his office deal with it. Because
Don't
he had
blame
seen what a contractor, had seen Mr. All-American in a kind of gruff Charles Bronson way could do. So, it's interesting, though. I know in the end, for even though he crashed the Jerry that could have been, Jerry loved Richard. And I know he was beating himself up that he couldn't have done something to avert this terrible situation, and he kept having lucid dreams where Richard appeared to him saying everything is okay. And I'm really interested in that as a writer and a human being. The idea that the afterlife can appear to you in your dreams. And I think that was really Richard. And I wish in the end Jerry could have saved himself.
Oh man, that's great. Well, for people that want to get into more details and find out a lot of very interesting endings, you can go to chipjacobs.com or Amazon or wherever and pick up The Darkest Glare. And do you have any like readings or any book signings coming up anywhere? I know with COVID and everything else, I don't know about.
Yeah, I'm sort of I don't have anything directly on the literary docket,
right?
But I am working to continue to tell the story in different ways, and I've never written a book where it just, because of the unusual quality, maybe the luridness of it, maybe the drama of a murder triangle, and who emerges, and it is very kind of Tarantino, Coen Brothers-ish. I've never had people so fascinated. So I'm trying to do that, and I'm trying to write, trying to make sure people learn about the story, even if they don't want to read it.
Right,
so,
right. No, it's great. Like I said,
it'll be on a screen coming to you.
Hopefully, we'll see it on Netflix or another Prime, Amazon Prime, or somewhere.
I hope so, because the best heroes are anti-heroes.
Yeah, right. Well, Chip, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you doing this, and hopefully next time, if it's another book, you're going to come in studio because you live locally, and
for sure,
and it would be great to see you. But everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate you guys for always supporting us. You can go to our YouTube channel. Please subscribe, leave a comment. Also go to our website, Truth Be Told Worldwide. Follow us on all of our social medias, and also you can listen to the podcast on Apple and all the other outlets out there. So until next time, I'm Tony Sweet for Truth Be Told. Take care, guys. This has been another episode of Truth Be Told. Thank you so much for watching. Recorded live at UBN Go Studios in Burbank, California. Join us on social media. Facebook, Truth Be Told Radio. Instagram, Truth Be Told Paranormal. Go to Truth Be Told Worldwide for more information on upcoming shows. This has been... All right. Thank you so... Oh, my God. That was so good. I loved it.
Thank you, Tony. Great time. It went blazingly